Hi there, and thanks for joining me for my JNUC 2020 talk, jamJAR 3 years on. Before we begin, we've got a little disclaimer we need you folks to pay a bit of attention to, have a little read. Okay, I'm going to proceed now. So first of all, who am I? My name's Ben Toms. I'm Technical Director of dataJAR, but you may also know me as Bracknell. And welcome to the bunker, as a lot of people call it, but this is where I mostly work now, COVID or no COVID. This is currently this is my little office. So dataJAR, who are we? What do we do? Well, we're part of the Apple Consultants Network. We're also a Jamf Gold reseller. We're a Jamf Preferred Services Partner, which is a special limited edition position that only some folks hold. And we're also a Jamf Managed Service Provider. And it's this last part, this last facet of our business and our relationship with Jamf, which is where jamJAR really came about. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about jamJAR, the what, the why, the how, what's new, what's happened over the past 3 years since we released jamJAR, show you a bit of jamJAR in action, and at the very end, we've got some links. So if you hold on till the end, you'll get the links for the items that we've been discussing throughout. Okay, so what is jamJAR? Well, jamJAR is an integration between several technologies from us at dataJAR. It's an integration between Jamf, Autopkg, Monkey, and again, from us at dataJAR, and this is how we got its name. You can see the J for Jamf, A for Autopkg, M for Monkey, and from us at dataJAR. And this is why I'm not allowed to rename things anymore. So before we begin, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why not patch? Well, Jamf reached out to us and several folks at the earliest days of patch, asking about what we wanted, down a little wish list, and talking to us about the design, etc. And at that time, the way that patch was engineered, the way that patch was going, etc., didn't fit us as a Jamf MSP. Now, we aren't the target market for patch. Patch isn't made for people that manage hundreds of Jamf deployments. So we weren't concerned with the fact that it wasn't directly focused on what we needed to do. But as things went on, we realised that with that, we had to create our own version of something. So whilst we carried on discussing with Jamf, we went off and built our own thing. And in the end, jamJAR took a couple of weeks to build initially, and we had it running in production about a year before patch actually came out. So if we look at the components of jamJAR, why Autopkg? Well, I'm going to read a little bit off the prompt here because it's a little blurb about what Autopkg is if you don't know. Autopkg is an automation framework for macOS software packaging and distribution, orientated towards the tasks one would normally perform manually to prepare third-party software for mass deployment to manage clients. In my words, Autopkg cuts out the faff of packaging software. I had to get faff in there somewhere. If you've ever seen any of my talks, you know, got it in early, got it in, and it's done now, I think, maybe. But it's a fantastic open source project. Even if you don't use jamJAR, even if you don't use Monkey or the other components we're talking about, you could at least use Autopkg to upload content to your Jamf environment via the JSS importer plugin. And there's a great load of work being done there as well. So it can really, really help and save you a lot of time with some of these tasks that are a bit of a faff. And why Monkey? Well, in the context of jamJAR, we're using Monkey because of the client-side smarts. Monkey, with every bit of software that Monkey has, there's a package info file. And the package info files, they actually have this metadata around the software, how to install the software, how to version the software, different items around that really come into their own when we look at using these and when we're looking alongside Jamf. And it's kind of laser focus on deploying software is what we're really employing here for within jamJAR. And why Jamf Pro? Well, Jamf Pro does many things and has many faceted products. I remember using Jamf Pro when it was green, before the MDM parts came out, before iPhones were even around. Then there might be one or two of you the same age of me as that as well, the same age with Jamf as well. And there's lots of things within Jamf that have grown over the years and that are really used within jamJAR to a great extent. So for example, as Jamf's an MDM, we deploy profiles to configure items from there. And then also we use the policy engine to trigger jamJAR workflows. And these are the things we're going to be talking about and looking down the line. So how does this all work together? Well, this is kind of a key thing to mention in regards to this configuration. jamJAR is an integration between Jamf Pro and Monkey. It's not actually an additional architecture or anything else like that. So what you really need a working Monkey environment, and again, hopefully up and running and being filled with the Monkey group being populated, by Autopkg. And this can be stood up on S3 or any other kind of web server that you need to host your Monkey on, a Monkey repo on, and that depends on your architecture and what you need. But it's very much worth spending time learning how vanilla Monkey works, out-of-the-box Monkey works, before we proceed with jamJAR. Likewise, we also need Jamf Pro. So you need a working Jamf Pro deployment. So an example of working Jamf Pro deployment would be activation code, APNS, having clients enrolled, etc., etc. But so jamJAR is the integration, no additional infrastructure, but you need those two things working separately, and it really pays to understand how these two things work before we amalgamate them and integrate them with jamJAR. So kind of how do we work then? So with Monkey's got several different configuration options, and then we do detail the ones what you just set within the jamJAR wiki. But really, the main key that we want to set here is the local only manifest key. Now, this tells Monkey to look for changes in a local file that can be triggered by an external management system. So folks have used Chef for this, folks have used maybe they've got Puppet, etc. And here we're using Jamf to change that content in a local file and then trigger an action within Monkey. The only addition we have to Monkey, so rather than we take Monkey from out of the box, we take the Monkey package from GitHub. You can rebrand that as you need, etc. But it's important to know it's just the basic vanilla Monkey package that we take, and then we add a Postflight. Now this jamJAR Postflight, this is again something that's supported by Monkey out of the box. A file called Postflight just sits in that location, is ran at the end of every single Monkey run. And this is the logic and some of the magic of jamJAR, and we're going to show you this. But this is where the user notifications pop up, etc. But with the Postflight in place and Monkey deployed to a client, what do we do next? Well, next we have a policy script. The policy script you add to Jamf, and then we have several different parameters here that we can run. $4 and $6 are your pertinent ones here. Again, that's the ones we're really going to talk about a bit today. But mostly add to installs, we'll add a title and try and get jamJAR to install it. And $6, add to uninstalls, we'll look to uninstall the title. The others, more detail, we'll go into them on the wiki, etc. But just for brevity and for this talk, we're just going to look at really focus on those two other options. So how does this look in Jamf? Well, once you've got your policy in place, you can just upload your jamJAR policy script and you can add a key to your $4, $6. Here, for example, we are looking at installing two Google titles, Google Chrome, Google Drive file stream. But you might notice the policies looked a little bit lackluster, look like they're missing something, such as full scoping and such as an inventory update, as you would normally do within Jamf. Well, there's a reason for this. So first of all, we talked about the package info file and the metadata that Monkey has. Here's an example with Google Chrome. There's quite a lot of detail here, and kind of the pertinent info, the info that you would normally add to a smart group is here, where you've got the version of the title and where does the title sit. Now, because this already exists within Monkey, there's no reason for us to duplicate the effort of putting this into Jamf. So we don't need a smart group to say, check for versions of Chrome. Instead, we can, if we want to make sure these devices have Chrome, they'll just install Chrome and then they'll use that metadata to make sure that Chrome's installed or not, or what version, etc. And all the detection is done. And this is where we talk about handing the logic off from the server side of Jamf to the client side via Monkey. So that's the scoping covered. And as you can see here, we've got a lot of other options here as well. These basic other options you could have a group that says offers items to install via self-service. And then if the item's installed, you can then update it from there. Monkey would call this like an optional install. So just because we don't need to use Jamf inventory doesn't mean we don't have to. There might be scenarios where we wish to. So for example, these policies, we're going to update Adobe Bridge 2020, Reader DC, Airfoil and Atom, if that's already installed on those clients and they're in the scope. So again, one policy in self-service to install via JamJAR, another policy to keep it updated if the title is installed. But again, the scope could be very simple. Literally, has it got this app? You know, application title is atom.app, etc. When the script is ran, you'll get this policy output, and you can see what's kind of happening here. So first of all, the usual Jamf output, the name of the script that we're running, the exit code, and the result. On here, we've added Google Chrome to installs. The pre-flight, so before we run the policy, before we Monkey's done its thing, what's happening, we've added Google Chrome to the installs of Monkey, and then afterwards, there's no items remaining. We've actually removed and installed Google Chrome. So kind of how does this work? Well, it's that Postflight is the main part here. So the policy script that writes to the manifest and then triggers Monkey, and Monkey runs through from there, after which, at the end of the Monkey run, it moves over to the Postflight. Well, the Postflight queries a file generated by Monkey called the Manage Install Report, and that is a report of what software was installed during the last Monkey run. Any titles it finds there, it checks against the manifest. So they're the items we've added with the Jamf policy. If an item has been installed during the last Monkey run, we then notify the user, and we're going to show you this in a sec as well. We notify the user that the item's been installed. And if an item's been installed or uninstalled, we remove it from the manifest. So the next time Monkey runs, it doesn't try and reinstall the software. It literally install, uninstall, until keep trying until successful, and then tidy itself up. After which, if anything was installed or uninstalled in the client, a recon is ran. So that's why there was no recon within that policy, because it's handled here by the Postflight. So if an item is installed, when the user's logged in, they'll receive a notification like this. This is your simple banner notification. We're going to see nicer GIFs and videos and stuff around this in a bit. But just an example here that we're just notifying the end user that Google Chrome 85, etc. was installed. And there's also an extension attribute which you can run as well. And the extension attribute looks at the JamJAR log file and will grab the last line. And here, this gives you the pertinent bits here to tell you that on the last time JamJAR ran, last time Monkey ran, the example, there was one item installed. And then after which there were no items removed, no items pending, and no warnings around any items that were within Monkey's manifest. So this gives you a way of having an overview of what's happening with your devices, a bit like a mile-high overview, especially considering the two systems, really, Monkey and Jamf aren't like fully integrated. You haven't got like Monkey Report or anything directly related, but this is a nice, simple way for you to keep track of what's happening. Now, Monkey will not install software under some conditions, such as if the software is being used, or there's also other actions where software might require a logout, etc., might require a restart, and it won't do that underneath the user. So what we've done here with JamJAR, when a piece of software meets that condition, we will actually notify the user and ask them to log out. If the user if the issue was because of its software was waiting to be installed, then what happens here is JamJAR will install the software, and as it showed there's a notification around Google Chrome being installed, and then it sends the user another notification to say, hey, nothing pending, nothing doing anymore, don't worry about it, it's all good. So someone could be using Chrome, could be on a webinar, etc., and after which they close Chrome after a period of time, and then Monkey runs again and the update happens. Again, I'm going to show you some more examples of this as well. If an item needs to be installed at logout or a restart, or no one is logged in whilst Monkey is running, you actually get this pop-up prompt on the screen, which is Manage Software Center, which advises exactly what's happening. And in this instance here, someone can click the stop button to stop the process, but there's configurations around that. The important thing here is, again, at the end of this Monkey run, if an item is installed or uninstalled, then also a Postflight is ran again and a recon is ran. The notification isn't posted to the user because there's no user logged in, but we will also update Jamf to notify Jamf that this title has been updated or uninstalled. Also, we talk about self-service. If someone runs the JamJAR policy through self-service, they'll then get this notification. The latest version of, in this case again, Google Chrome, is installed. Again, it's context aware. We want someone to click the button then you want them to say, why is this failed? What's happening here? Why is this not happening? Just let them know that we haven't updated Chrome because you have the latest version. And this differs a bit when you look at Jamf policies, which will post a notification at the beginning and end, regardless of what happened in the middle. And this notification also will only show if it's triggered via self-service. If you're running a Jamf policy to update Chrome on a check-in interval once a week, and self-service, and they haven't triggered the policy via self-service, they won't get this notification. It's just literally in the scenario where someone has clicked the button in self-service and said, update me. And we turn around and say, actually, you're good, you're up to date. So that's the basics of JamJAR, and that's kind of what we released and what we had running 3 years ago when we first released the product. But what's changed? Well, over the years, JamJAR has officially supported more monkey workflows, and actually mostly without code changes. So, the nicest things that you can suddenly support are the things you have to do work for, which is great. So let's talk about some of these. So first of all, the things that we've realized that we can now support via JamJAR, monkey conditions, monkey items that we didn't realize we could support, are things such as requires. Now, requires is a special key within the package info file of a title. And as an example, this could be a title that requires Adobe Air to be installed before you install the main title, which we have for a couple of apps for our customers. So whereas with Jamf, you might have a smart group that says, is Adobe Air installed, then do this next thing. You can actually bundle these in together within Monkey. And Monkey knows that, right, before I install this title, I need to install this thing first. And that's the requires option here. Also, an update for. This is so rather than a thing that happens before you install the title, an update for is an option, it's an item that happens after you do the install. So this is really pertinent to certain things, and really this comes into is when we do macOS upgrades. So with Monkey, we can upgrade people from macOS 10.14 to 10.15, after which we can have a item that runs a recon. There's an inventory update on first boot. So the machine updates the OS. The first thing it does, it gives you that Monkey status window, the one that pops out of the login window, and it updates the OS. Once the OS updates, it updates the record within Jamf with the inventory record for the device. And then Jamf knows that, hey, this device is now on 10.15, and Jamf will then look at deploying what it needs for PCPs, etc. via MDM, because the record has then been updated. We also have arrays and install workflows. So similarly, Monkey supports StartOS install. And the fact that it supports that means we can do the macOS upgrades. But because of that, we can also leverage the arrays and install workflows, which means that you can have a one-click button within self-service that erases the OS, installs the OS again, and then with automated device enrollment, you can start to go through that process of reprovisioning the device really seamlessly. And the nice thing is with these, both these macOS upgrades and arrays and install can run via self-service or as policies if you're very brave, or if you're in maybe an education environment. Imagine clicking one button to deploy a policy and all of your lab devices upgrading their OS, running a recon at boot, and then all the needed policies running down and all the needed profiles being put in place. And it can we do this for a lot of customers, and it can really be quite a lovely, smooth experience. So one of the things that changed in November 2018, we released JamJAR 1.2. Thanks to APIs for his PR, that handles API-ZZ. And that means that when you look at the JamJAR script, rather than having one item for $4, you can add multiple items within there. At JNUC last year, JNUC 2019, we also released something called Monkey Catalog Browser. This app is a macOS client that is to be ran on a Monkey enrolled device under an admin account. And the reason for this is to really help you with your policies and with your administration of JamJAR within Jamf. As an example, this is what you see if you run Monkey Catalog Browser on a macOS device. That'll give you a list of all the items you've got within Monkey. And the first column here is the nice customer-facing name, what you'll see in the notifications. The second column is what you need within your JamJAR policies to enter in for $4 or $6. The third column is the version number of the software you have within your catalogs. And the right column is which catalog they're in. The catalog is more of a Monkey convention. Again, you'll be a bit more familiar with that once you know a bit more about Monkey. But really the pertinent thing here in regards to jamJAR policies is that second column, because Monkey is case sensitive with these items. So you need to make sure you're bang on the money with the titles and the details that you put in there. And with that list of items that you have there, we can also export them to a CSV, which can then give you the titles that you can pass on to other members of your team, etc. And even then, if you do a search for titles here, such as Autopkg MBI, that will give you the list of just that title itself. So you could search just for Adobe, and that would show just the Adobe titles, export, pass that on to your colleagues, etc. as needed. With version 1.5, which was released in June of this year, June 2020, we include support for Notifier, which we then released shortly afterwards. Now, Notifier is a Swift app written by us at dataJAR, and it allows you to post macOS alert notifications and banner notifications on macOS 10.10 clients. What we mean by this is this first message here, this is an alert. This is a persistent notification, and the one above is a banner notification. So the banners come and go. They're there for about 30 seconds or so. But the alert is that persistent nag. And this is where we can start to now flesh out and improve our workflows with jamJAR. You've seen the notifications that we currently have in place. Well, these are some of the changes that we've got bringing forward. And to do so, we had to, again, change the user experience a little bit here. We wanted to follow the macOS defaults. So we're using Notification Center. Also, Notifier uses the User Notifications API, the new API, for notifications on 10.15 and above, and the NS User Notifications API for 10.10 to 10.14. This will also be Big Sur compatible. It was Big Sur compatible for Beta 1 and Beta 2. There was a change. When Big Sur comes out, this will be released, have a compatible version there as well. So this changes, and the additional workflows we're going to be looking at, and this is some of the examples we're going to show shortly, is actually going to come up with jamJAR 2.0. Now, this is going to be expected soon after Monkey's 5.1 is released. There are some requirements around that, but some of the main changes here are the fact that jamJAR is actually going to require and only going to use Monkey shipping Python 3. There's a question around the longevity of Monkey and question around longevity of Monkey. Apologies. Question around the longevity of Python on macOS, especially as Python 2, especially as that went end of life this year. And so to be safe, we're going to make sure that we run only with Monkey's Python, because you need Monkey to run jamJAR. Monkey's shipping with his own Python. It just makes sense just to make sure that we use that. There's also changes around macOS updates, and Monkey has got some changes in Monkey 5 specific to that, which we're going to show up in a second as well. And that's going to be supported within jamJAR 2.0. So first of all, this is jamJAR in action. Now, this is jamJAR 2.0, 2.0, whichever way I'm going to call it, as well as it being a rebranded version of Monkey with Monkey rebrand, as well as Notifier being rebranded as well, to show you the cohesive experience that you can do here. We're also going to show workflows using self-service, as well as using Managed Software Center. So there's a lot of items here that we're kind of putting together in a melting pot, but just to show that there's still a cohesive, great user experience that you can deliver with these. So first of all, here's an example of an application being installed. The Mac's being used, the little notification pops up at the screen. The title's been installed because there's nothing obtrusive. It can be installed because the application is not running or there's no other requirements. Simply pops up a message, it's installed, done. And again, from self-service. So what happens if someone runs the policy from self-service and the software is already updated? We showed this earlier on, but again, just giving a bit more context. We've got a rebranded self-service here. We've got our desktop branded, etc., as most tools will have, or you'd have at least maybe self-service rebranded. And then we're going to run through, and the notification there says, oh no, the latest version of Google Chrome is installed. Again, context to the user. So here we have someone reading a fantastic blog, and it wouldn't be me if it wasn't for a bit of self-promotion thrown into something that I'm already promoting ourselves anyway, but but they have an update pending. But they're busy, they click close, they don't want to worry about that, they want to carry on reading this fantastic blog. Now, again, they're carrying on. They're reading another fantastic blog post. And Monkey's run again, either through Monkey's own hourly trigger or another jamJAR policy is running in a sec, and they'll get another notification. So they go, do you know what? I'm going to click the logout button this time. I'm going to go proceed here. We're doing a graceful logout when this happens. This means anything that's open that requires the user to save any items or any prompts will happen. It's not just a quick, you're out. If they've got any open documents, they'll be asked to save, etc. And as you would expect, as you get from kind of clicking the logout button as well. So what happens if someone clicks a message? Well, we actually can set Notifier to open an application. So on here, we've got someone reading a fantastic blog post again, once more. They click the notification, and this is Managed Software Center has been opened. There's context here as to what's been waiting to install, why it's pending, because I've got Chrome open in this case. If they quit Chrome, click OK, click the update button again, then Chrome will actually update through Managed Software Center. We get a lot of questions around how we work with this and how we use these two products. But this is it here. We have Managed Software Center locked down in the way that we use jamJAR, just to show the Updates tab. But it gives people that fantastic context around why they're being asked to log out, what is actually happening. Again, as this runs through, the user will be notified when the software is updated, at the very end of which, if there's, again, the title installed or uninstalled, Jamf is then updated as well. Here we are, finishing up. And all these are real time as well, as you can kind of guess by the pauses. But as an example of again, the user experience really, and this is the important part of this. We want to make sure that we're installing the latest version of software to people in the correct manner and giving a great user experience. So there you go, Google Chrome has been updated, notifying the user there, and we've now got the Postflight task. And the Postflight task, again, is this recon. So let's look at Monkey's software update workflow. So in a second, you're going to see an update advising that the device has a macOS update pending. And this is something that's new within jamJAR 2.0 and requires Monkey 5 as well. Again, Managed Software Center opens. They get a notification here that there's a restart required. The update is 10.15.6. They click the update button. They'll get a notification here of what needs to happen. They can skip the update. But if they skip the update, next time jamJAR runs, they'll be reprompted again. If they click update, then what Monkey's going to do now is open up the system preference pane and actually install the update as per the way that Apple envisioned. Yeah, they don't envision us using the software update binary. They don't envision us using Jamf policies for this. They instead see it being triggered by a user at logout and the user then logging out. So that's an overview of jamJAR. Some of the options we have there, how it works together, some of the changes that are coming up will be available soon. If not by the release of this very shortly. For the links, you can go to our GitHub, to github.com/dataJAR/JNUC 2020. There'll be a number of links in there to some of the items I've mentioned. And we also do have a version of this that we manage and support and will work with you on the Jamf Marketplace called Auto Update for Jamf, where we maintain the Monkey repo for you. We do all the auto packaging for you, and you can then just roll this out through your Jamf environment, Jamf Cloud, etc., as you have. Thank you for listening. Please give us feedback by completing the survey using the widget below.